Hey guys, welcome back to a new video by Biology with Xuan. So today we are going to go through the Cambridge IGCSE Biology, Paper 2, Multiple Choice Extended, the 061022, February-March 2025. As always, this paper and also the answer paper will be attached in the description box, so you can find that link in that description box itself. If you have any questions regarding any of the questions or would like any further clarification, feel free to drop down in the comment section below. So let's get this started. So question 1. The relationship of 4 species of bacteria P, Q, R and S were compared. Species P and Q have more recent common ancestor than either species has with species R. Species S developed recently from species P. Which species has the least similar base sequence in their DNA compared to the other 3 species of bacteria? Okay, so let's maybe draw out this is actually called a phylogenetic tree actually what we are actually planning to draw here, which actually helps us to compare how closely similar it is comparing to the offspring to the ancestors. So let's say if that is what it said, right, is that P and Q have a more recent common ancestor, right? So I might as well just put that as P, okay, where it will form into this P, all right, and Q, okay, have a more recent common ancestor than either species has with species R. So meaning, right, I would say is that species R can be quite more distant than usual, okay, quite more distant, that maybe it could be very, very far away. Let's say there's actually more branches away, and then it is more distant away from itself, okay. And what they say is that next, species S developed recently from species P, meaning, right, species P has already have another species S. So which species has the least similar base sequence in the DNA compared to the other 3 species of the bacteria? Well, the answer would be R, because R is more distant away from P, Q, and especially S. So what is actually the key message that we can get here? When we say that there's a more recent ancestor, right, so it means that it is more closely related and thus has more similar bases, base sequence, base DNA sequences. Okay, so this is something to remember lah. So I hope this makes sense. Question number 2. The diagram shows an arthropod. To which group does it belong? So I will remember this as this way, okay? I am cooking myself, okay? So how do I actually classify? Because since they give you this organism, and how do you know that which is by identifying the number of legs. So from here you can see that actually 8 legs. So how am I able to classify this? So I told you I am cooking myself, okay? Myself, okay, at 6 a.m., 8 a.m., 10 a.m. and 20 o'clock p.m. So that is how it works. So it means that this is insects, arachnid, crustaceans, and myriapods. 6, 8, 10, and more than 20. So if you see 8 legs, then the answer will be arachnids. Alright, so I hope this actually gives you a much easier clue. I use this to remember the number of legs, and it's a very famous past year question actually. Question 3. Which structures are found in both plant cells and bacterial cell? So I'm going to use a blue color to indicate plant cell and bacterial cell as red color. Only if I have 2 ticks will that be eligible for a yes. If there is 1 cross ticks or 1 no in any way, it will be considered to be no. Alright, so let's go through one by one. So, do plant cells have a cell membrane? Yes, they do. Do they have a cell wall? Yes, they do. Do they have a plasmid? Not really. Do they have a ribosomes? Yes. Now, let's look at bacterial cells. Do they have a cell membrane? Yes. Do they have cell wall? Also yes. Do they have plasmid? Yes, they do. And ribosome? Yes. So the answer is yes, yes, no, yes. So the answer is D. Okay, question 4. A cell is 65 micrometer across. So what is this measurement? All right, in mm. Okay, so you first of all just use simple math. What is 1 millimeter? 1 millimeter equals to 1000 micrometer. So given that it is 65 micrometer, so how would you get the answer for this? So divide by 1000, so you're going to get 0.065 millimeter. So the answer is C, right? Question 5. The diagram shows the 4 mesophyll cell W, X, Y, and Z. Water moves through these cells. So which arrow shows the direction of movement of water through this cell? So what do you need to tell yourself first? Is this osmosis? Yes. Why? Because it says it's the direction of movement of water. So osmosis will be your key point here. But what is actually the definition of osmosis again? It's moving from a high water potential, WP, to lower water potential. So now, they have given you in this question in kilopascal, and you can see there's all negative here, and you might be very, very confused. So actually just keep the concept the same way, but just that now you need to differentiate between which is more negative and which is less negative. If it's less negative, means it's nearer towards the positive number, but it won't reach positive sign. Okay, so how does water potential move then? It moves from higher to lower, so therefore it must be from lesser negative to more negative. So now you have to find within A, B, C, D which one represents lesser negative to more negative. Alright, so let's look at A. A is minus 600, it is more negative, so I just put in more negative, and you can see the numbers becomes less negative. So less negative, therefore it's wrong because it doesn't move from more negative to lesser negative, and you see the direction of arrow is moving towards the right hand side, therefore A is out. B is pointing to again going to the right from W to Z, so minus 350 is less negative, minus 400, minus 450, minus 600 becomes more negative, so more negative, less negative, so therefore it is correct. But let's look at C. Now C is positioning to the left, so Z to W. So Z is more negative, and it goes down to become less negative. So it is wrong. It should be from lesser negative to more negative. So the wrong answer is C. So for D, it's also moving to the left hand side. Minus 450 is more negative, and minus 200 is less negative. So this is also wrong. So the answer is B. So keep this concept in mind. Lesser negative means it's nearer towards the positive line. Question 6. 3 processes are listed. Molecules or ions are moved across membranes. Molecules or ions are moved by protein carriers. Ions are taken up by root hairs. Which process can involve active transport? Active transport means they require energy. And what do they also require? Protein carriers. And where is all this transport seen? At the cell membrane. So 1 and 2 is surely correct. Third, ions are taken up by root hair cell. Because ions are charged, they are not allowed to go through by passive diffusion like osmosis and diffusion, and it has to be undergo by a special carrier. So active transport is a must. So A is correct. Question 7. A section of chromosome contains 4,500 bases. There are 1,450 G bases. How many A bases are there? So how would you do this? So you know that C and G are best friends, and T and A are best friends. So given that G is 1,450, right? C also has to be 1,450 because it must have equal bases. So if you add up 1,450 plus 1,450, what will your answer be? So you're going to get 2,900. So now use 4,500 minus 2,900. So what would you get? Okay, so If you minus this off, what you're going to get the answer is 1,600. So now you see that both T and A is a total of 1,600 bases. Now the question wants how many A bases are there. So you just divide by 2. So you get 800. So the answer is A. Alright, so I hope this is clear. Question 8. Which chemical element is found in proteins but not in carbohydrates? So this is a very simple question. Nitrogen. So it is quite self-explanatory on its own. Question 9. Which statement describes enzymes? Enzymes are carbohydrates. This is wrong. It should be protein. Enzymes are involved in metabolic reaction. Yes, because they break down things. Enzymes decrease the rate of reaction. Wrong. This should be increase rate of reaction. Enzymes have the same shape of active site as their substrate. Wrong. It has a different shape. And it has, remember, it's always a lock and key. Lock and key do not have the same design, but their design is complementary, meaning like they can fit to each other. Nice, 100%. Question 10. The graph shows how the rate of photosynthesis and the rate of respiration in a plant changes over 24-hour period. Which graph shows the correct rate of photosynthesis and the rate of respiration? Okay, so they tell you that photosynthesis in the black line, respiration is at those dotted lines. So what will actually be the correct answer? I know A is the correct answer. Why is that? Because you have to remember that photosynthesis requires two things. They need sun and they need chlorophyll. So it has to undergo during the day. It cannot undergo during the night. But the only time that respiration can really occur at all times, right, is actually 24/7. Okay, 24/7. Why is that? Because respiration do not need sunlight. They can just undergo as long as they have enough glucose and they have oxygen. That is what they need. So that's why A is the correct answer. But let's look at B. So look at B. B has both respiration and photosynthesis at the same time at high amounts, and the rest during the dark is nothing. That is not possible. If during the dark there is nothing, right, it means the plant will die actually, because like how is it going to survive during the night if nothing happens? But let's look at C. C is where respiration becomes the top. Photosynthesis is during the night. So as long as you see photosynthesis during the night, right, which is actually between this hour and this hour, right, is already wrong in nature because photosynthesis only happens during the day. D, this is also slight. B doesn't make sense at all. D is also automatically cancelled. Question 11. The photomicrograph shows the lower surface of a leaf. So what is the structured label X? So actually quite simply you can see that this is actually at the lower surface, whereas near to the lower epidermis, and then you can see this is a very familiar opening like shape. So X actually represents as the guard cells where they actually open and close. So what is actually this part that looks like a mouth? So this is actually the stomata that actually opens up and close for what? For gas exchange to occur, and also for transpiration. So question 12. A student is told that the diet is not balanced and they may be at risk at developing scurvy. What should a student do to reduce their risk of scurvy? So this question comes back to tell you that what kind of deficiency is scurvy. If you remember, there's only two deficiencies you have to learn in this syllabus. One is rickets and another one is scurvy. So scurvy is mainly due to the vitamin C deficiency and rickets is due to vitamin D. So therefore, if you can see your answers, vitamin C generally you can find in fruits. More importantly is in oranges, which has a high amount of vitamin C. Vitamin D is more seen in milk. So I think you can rule out. Calcium is out. Vitamin C, yes, provide more vitamin C. But the question, the item that is containing inside is wrong. Milk does not have vitamin C. Vitamin D is more in amount. Eat more citrus fruit will provide more calcium, also wrong. Vitamin C, alright? And eat citrus fruit, which is generally like oranges, lemon. Question 13. The diagram shows 4 types of human tooth. Which teeth are used for grinding food? So the word grinding is giving you more of the food that's actually being smeared down to at the most, you know. So which one can actually do the most grinding work? So this one is unfortunately you have to know based on what you can experience, also what you have read to, which generally only happens with the premolars and the molars because they have a larger teeth surface. So when you bite on it, it can easily grind anything that is much harder, which actually the incisors and canine cannot really do. Question 14. Which substance causes a change in pH when food enters the small intestine? So the answer will be bile. So bile will actually make the mixture of the food in the intestine to be neutralized. So neutral. Why? Because bile in nature is alkali. So when alkaline and acidic from the stomach neutralizes, it gives you a neutral pH. Then it's easier to break down. Question 15. Which conditions causes the highest rate of transpiration? So highest rate of transpiration is still very similar towards highest rate of evaporation. So if you can see that if you have higher temperature, higher wind speed means more molecules are being moved, alright, and then lower humidity, then definitely the answer will be B. While the rest, like high temperature, high wind speed, high humidity, is wrong. Low, it must be higher temperature, higher wind speed, and this is correct, low humidity, but wrong. This should be low humidity. So the answer is B. Question 16. The diagram shows the heart defect that some babies are born with. So the arrows indicate the direction of blood flow. So which statement explains why this heart defect might cause the baby to have poor growth? So A. Blood flows to the lung at high pressure, increasing the rate of gas exchange. This has totally no relevance because we are actually talking about the heart. Blood flows to the lungs at low pressure, decreasing rate of gas exchange. Neither it has also any correlation. Mixing of blood results in less oxygen available for respiration. Yes, that's correct. Why? Because when you have the septum being not closed properly, right, what happens? You're going to mix both oxygenated blood and also deoxygenated blood. That is not something that you want. How about mixing of blood result in more glucose available for respiration? This is totally also having no relevance at all. So the answer is C. Question 17. The diagram shows the effect of vaccination on the human body. Three components in the diagram are represented by numbers. So number 1 is where immune response occurs, and they can provide passive immunity. And another one is provide long-term immunity. So what would be actually the correct answer? Which components are actually the memory cells? So memory cells generally where you can see in active immunity. So active immunity is very important for any secondary immune response, very helpful. So anything that is about secondary or memory is where you actually keep and also remember, right? It's all preparing for a long-term immunity. So the answer for this will be 3, because passive immunity will not be able to give memory cells first of all, and therefore won't provide you any long-term immunity. Alright. Question 18. What helps to keep the trachea open during breathing? Okay, which actually provides that flexibility and also prevents collapsing, which is actually the cartilage. The cartilage is a little bit more flexible during breathing when it's able to expand, when it's able to kind of narrow at certain situations. And you know this cartilage is very much useful for breathing to occur. Question 19. Yeast can respire aerobically and also anaerobically. For each molecule of glucose used in yeast, how many more carbon dioxide gas are produced by aerobic respiration compared with anaerobic respiration? So, given that you remember that aerobic respiration actually produces 6, and compared with anaerobic respiration which only produces 2. So, what is the difference? 6 minus 2 will be 4. So, the answer is 4 more. Question 20. In a healthy human, in which blood vessels would you find the lowest concentration of urea? So, you know that urea will actually be part of the urine afterwards. So, where can you see the lowest concentration of it? Which should be at the renal vein. Why is that? Because all of the urea is actually drained into the kidney. So, for processing ready, right, what goes back to the blood, which is the renal vein, we have lesser urea. Because if you have urea back into the blood, then what is the purpose of we actually peeing in nature? To remove the waste product is also important. So that's why renal artery will actually have one of the higher urea concentrations, but when it comes to the renal vein, it reduces already. Question 21. A specific eye condition can cause permanent contraction of the ciliary muscles. Which row is correct for an eye with this condition compared to an eye without this condition? So this is generally something that you have to remember, which is actually causing permanent contraction of the ciliary muscles. So what do you think this is actually would denote? So first of all, you have to see that you know there's two things: suspensory ligament and also refraction of light rays onto the retina. So the answer will be B, because it slacks, so it stops from actually coming back, and therefore the refraction of light rays onto the retina will actually increase in nature. Okay, so what's the result of this? So it means that this person can only see things near. Alright, when they are able to see things near, what happens? More light will be actually refracted. Okay, because the ciliary muscles actually permanent contracted. That is also one of the clues that I've already given you, that this is only where this person doing accommodation, they only can see something near only. Alright, and what is the result of the lens shape? Okay, that is also I further increase follow up with the question. So the lens shape will become more spherical in nature, or you can say more fatter. So as a result, this person can only see things at near distance and will require glasses to help to able to see things further away. Question 22. The liver and the pancreas work together to control the concentration of glucose. Which statement is correct? The liver converts the small molecule of glucose into large molecule glucagon. This is actually wrong. It should be the hormones actually. The liver releases the hormone insulin when blood glucose concentration is too high. Alright, this is actually wrong. The liver do not produce this hormone. It's the pancreas. Okay, the pancreas is the one that produces it. The pancreas does not respond to an increase in blood glucose concentration. This is also wrong. If it doesn't respond, what happens? This person will actually get diabetes already. Then that is not possible, right? That's not how negative feedback would work. The pancreas responds to a fall in blood glucose concentration by increasing the release of hormone of glucagon. Yes, that is correct, because if your blood currently has lower glucose, your body will respond negative feedback by increasing the glucose concentration. So how do they do that? They will release glucagon, and what do they do? To convert glycogen to glucose. So glucose will enter your bloodstream. Question 23. In the dark, okay, plant shoots grow upwards and roots grow downwards. What causes this response? The key word here is dark. When there's in darkness, right, how everything still grows is by gravity. Phototropism is due to light, but given that this is in the dark, there will be no phototropism. As a result, there's only gravitropism. So the answer is C. Question 24. What is the reason why antibiotics should be used only when it's essential? When you overuse it, what happens? They will form antibiotic resistance, which is not something that we want actually. So, why? It increases the artificial selection of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Wrong. Artificial resistance only involves human picking and breeding them to get the specific advantage of that organism that we want. But this is bacteria. Why do we want to artificially select? So anything with artificial selection is wrong. It increases the natural selection of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. That is also incorrect. It should be reducing the natural selection. Alright, when you reduce the natural selection, there's more chance for this to if it reduces it, then you have lesser chance of growing antibiotic resistant bacteria. When you increase it, right, it means that this person has been using over antibiotics or not following the treatment plan that's given by doctors or anything, then you can see the chance of antibiotic resistant bacteria for occurring is super duper high. So the whole point is this: why do we use it only when in session? Is to reduce natural selection. If you give natural selection, right, it means that the bacteria will compete. Who becomes the strongest will win, and they will colonize and then continue to worsen the infection or worsening the current condition. Question 25. Which row describes self-pollination? Pollen transferred from the anther to the stigma of a different flower on the same plant. Yeah, that's actually correct actually. But pollen transferred from an anther to the stigma of a flower on the different plant of the same species. This is incorrect. This is cross-pollination. Pollen transferred from an anther to the stigma of the same flower. Yes, because self, going back to your own self, the same flower on your own. which is actually correct. Question 26. The list shows terms used when describing sexual reproduction. Which terms used only when describing sexual reproduction in plants? Male gamete, female gamete. Male gamete is nope, female gamete neither, because this is both in humans. Okay, they're now asking you for plants. Ovule, yes. Ovary, not really. Ovary you see more again in humans, that becomes the main one. Filament, yes. Fertilization, yes you do, but you can also see this in animals, right? In humans, you can see this in humans too. Haploid, you also can see this in humans. It's also used a term too. So it's not that male gamete and female gamete is not found in plants, but human also have this. But they say that which terms are only used means that you can only see these terms being the main driving factor for reproduction in plants. So that's why the answer is 3 and 5. So, which statement correctly describes the effect of hormone in the menstrual cycle that lasts for 28 days? So FSH causes maturation of an egg to day 21. That's not possible because before day 14 it should be ready for ovulation ready. LH stimulates the release of an egg on day 14. Yes, that's correct. Estrogen maintains the uterus lining between day 14 and day 28. No, it should be before that, like day 0 to day 14. That is the term when estrogen is actually more prominent. Progesterone causes the repair of the thickening of the uterus lining between day 4 to day 14. This is actually incorrect. It should be after day 28 towards the prepping of the new menstrual cycle. After it has broken down, the uterus has been broken down already, then progesterone will start to repair to prepare for the next menstrual cycle. So that shouldn't be in day 14. Day 4 to day 14, it should be quite near towards the end and towards the beginning, the very beginning few days of the menstrual cycle. Question 28. What is the main hormone responsible for development of male secondary sexual characteristics? So adrenaline, nope, we both have adrenaline. Insulin, both male and female has it. Estrogen is mainly found in woman or girl, where this is more of the main driving hormone. Testosterone is the main hormone found in male. Question 29. Which term is defined as the length of DNA that codes for a protein? Well, obviously, this is a very straightforward question. If you know the definition, you definitely know what's the term, which is gene. 30. Which statement about the sex chromosome is correct? Men and women can inherit characteristics controlled by genes on the X chromosome. That is correct because both men and women have X chromosome. X, Y, and X. Men and women can inherit characteristics controlled by genes on the Y chromosome. Wrong, because women do not have Y chromosome. They only have XX. It's only male that can have. Unless man is excluded from this, unless it's woman that's excluded from this criteria, then this can be correct. Only men can inherit characteristics controlled by genes on the X chromosome. Wrong. Women can also because they have XX. Only women can inherit characteristics controlled by genes on the Y chromosome. That is also incorrect. It's only men that is possible to do that. Question 31. The graph shows how the mass of DNA changes during a mitotic cell division. Where on the graph are two cells formed? Okay, so initially you can see that the DNA right at here is like, let's say we put it as 24. And then as you go towards the phases, right, especially you come to C, you can see the number actually double. Okay, when two cells are formed, right, the DNA, then when it splits, then it becomes here, and then it goes back to where it begins again. That's where it restarts the cycle. So D is where the final stage occurs. The mass of DNA actually changes already. So that's why the answer for this question is D. Question 32. A man with blood group A and genotype IAIO has a child with a woman has blood group B and a genotype of IBIO. What is the probability of the child having a blood group O? So let's do a Punnett square. So let's put IA, IO, and we just put a IB, IO. So let's just cross it. IA, IB, IB, IO, IA, IO, and IO, IO. So what's the chance of having blood group O, which is completely what we call as recessive, which is only 1 out of 4, therefore it's 0.25. So the answer is B. Question 33. What are the sources of genetic variation in population? So meiosis, mutation, random matings are source of genetic variation. If you can see for meiosis and random mating, this is correct actually. But asexual reproduction won't produce genetic variation. What about C? Mitosis, mutation, random fertilization? This is correct, but mitosis will produce the same parent cell, nothing different. Mitosis, again, this is also wrong. Random fertilization, asexual reproduction is also incorrect. They won't produce genetic variation. Question 34. The food chain shows how energy is transferred to a human. Lettuce, snails, duck to human. Where did the energy of the lettuce come from? Remember, it always starts with the sun. Question 35. The processes listed affect the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So which processes increase the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Increased deforestation, yes, because there's no photosynthesis, no oxygen being input to the environment. Increased tree planting, this will decrease the CO2 or increase more oxygen. Decrease fuel combustion will decrease CO2. Increase fossil fuel combustion, it will increase CO2. So 1 and 4 is the correct answer. Question 36. Which organism can be sources of energy for decomposers? So decomposers, it can be anything. Okay, source of energy for decomposers is for all organisms that's basically living things, and they can be broken down by the decomposers at any form. It doesn't mean that producers is the only one. It's not possible. All can be done. Alright. Question 37. A coral reef contains species such as stony corals, sponges, seahorses, and whale sharks. These species interact with each other and are affected by the temperature, salt concentration, and oxygen concentration of the water. Using all the information given, what is being described? So you can see species being interacted, and you can see and affected by temperature, external factors are being played, and you can see there's a lot of creatures here. So this is actually an ecosystem, because the coral reef is what represents for all living organisms living in the aquatic environment to actually survive. So ecosystem is a more better explanation. Community is more of just one or two species interact. Population is the same species, like us human, we interact with each other. This is the population. And food web doesn't make sense. Nothing is eating each other, and there's no result of anything energy changes being mentioned here. Okay. So question 38. What can cause the increase in the size of a rabbit population? An increase in disease that affects rabbit will actually decrease the population size. An increase in available food? Yes, definitely. An increase in pollution in the habitat, this will decrease the population size. An increase in predation will also decrease the population size. So the answer is B. Question 39. How does eutrophication lead to the death of the fish? A sudden increase in the number of bacteria that increases the spread of disease. There will be no diseases spread during eutrophication, so A is out. Algae respire instead of photosynthesize. That doesn't make sense, because if it respires, it gives more CO2. That's not the whole point. It's that when it photosynthesizes, it means that it takes or it grabs the oxygen away. Therefore, there will be no enough oxygen for the fish, let's say. Decomposer bacteria lower the oxygen concentration in the water. Yes, because decomposers will constantly undergo respiration. The more respiration they undergo, the more oxygen is taken away. Then the whole oxygen concentration in the water will drop. The fish will not be able to use the oxygen for themselves. They will die. And D. Fertilizers reduce the availability of nitrates in the water. This is wrong. This should be increased. Last question. The diagram shows a bacterial cell. Which cell structure makes bacteria useful in genetic modification, which is the plasmid. So plasmid has small circular DNA rings. The answer is B. C is ribosomes. D is those DNA rings, the circular DNA. And A is technically like the cell wall actually. Okay, so the answer is B. So if you have any questions, make sure to comment down in the comment section below. I hope I actually went in detail for this paper. And see you next time. Bye bye.